Good afternoon, I am Andrew Heaney, and this is part 2 of my series of talking about Marvel movies. Again, this is every film from Marvel Studios, including the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as well as both Ghost Rider movies and Punisher Warzone, every film from the XMen and Fantastic Four franchise, and every Spider-Man movie, and I added in also Venom and Into the Spider-Verse as well. So today I'm going to talk about half of every film from the last decade, the 2010s, from the year 2010 to 2014. Before I begin, I would like to correct 2 of my ratings from the last video. My rating for X-Men has bumped down to a 6 out of 10 instead of a 7, and my rating for Iron Man, though my thoughts still stand, has been brought down to a 7. A high 7, granted, is closer to an 8 than a 6, but so X-Men is now a 6, and Iron Man is now a 7. Now I will start with Iron Man 2, which unfortunately is vastly inferior to the first film. It's way too long. That's my biggest problem with it. That, and there's way too much shit going on. The most memorable action is with Black Widow instead of Iron Man and Rhodey. On the other hand, I don't hate this movie because the characters are pretty good. The editing is good, aside from the really bad pacing. The villain is really weak, I barely remember him. Sam Rockwell and Mickey Rourke, I think? Those 2 guys played really forgettable villains that do not show up again as far as I'm concerned with the MCU. The film, again, is way too long. The villains are terrible. There's way too much crap going on. Rhodey is better in this movie, with Don Cheadle playing him rather than Terrence Howard, but still, I found him to be a relatively weak character still. He does not have a whole lot to shine outside of this movie, which is a little unfortunate. Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man is great, but he's a little bit less likable in this movie than he was in the first one. Oh well, and a lot of it is just to set up the Avengers, which I will get to, don't worry. Next we have 2011. I'll start with X-Men First Class, even though I'm not entirely sure if that was the first one released that year. X-Men First Class is actually really good. X-Men First Class is basically a prequel, to an extent, of the first X-Men film taking place in the 60s. It's a really good period piece, actually. Starring James McAvoy as Professor X and Michael Fassbender as Eric Lehnsherr, who will later become Magneto, as well as a really brilliant use of the F-bomb with this cameo.
Excuse me, I'm Eric Lehnsherr.
Sounds Xavier.
Go fuck yourself.
Yeah, I like that scene too. I saw this in the theater when I was like 14 or so. I'm like, yeah, it's great use of the F word. Oh, I hate myself when I was 14. Oh well, anyway. It also stars a bunch of minor mutants, as well as Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique, who, I'll be honest, outside of Silver Linings Playbook, I do not like Jennifer Lawrence. She's not bad as Mystique, she's just not good as her either. She's okay as Katniss Everdeen, even though the only movie from that series I liked was Catching Fire, but that's another story. The villain, I barely remember. He had a cool power. He could absorb, like, any type of attack towards him. That was cool. The story's okay-ish, but the characters are really well done, aside from the villain, unfortunately. The dialogue, some of it's really bad, but some of it's also really good. The effects and the art direction is a massive step up from the previous trilogy. And also X-Men Origins Wolverine. The score is pretty good. There's not much else I can say. I recommend this movie, and I don't mind revisiting it every now and again. Thor, it's not a very good movie. It's about Thor. Pretty bad introduction to this character, honestly. One of my least favorite MCU films, if I'm to be honest. But Thor is not that good. I'll compare it to a slightly better film, Wonder Woman, which I actually like, to an extent. Wonder Woman reminded me a lot of Thor, that it had a lot of mythological elements to it, but it also had rom-com stuff in the middle act. But the difference between Wonder Woman and Thor is that when Thor does it, movie over. Like, wow. The rom-com stuff in this film is really, really bad. I don't like Natalie Portman's character. I hate Kat Dennings' character. Yeah, the villain Loki, he's good later, but he's not good in this. The one thing that saves this film from a lower score than what I'm giving it is the art direction. It's so good. Like, the production design especially. Like, Asgard looks beautiful. That's the only thing I truly like about this film, honestly. It's just not very good in my opinion. Next we got Captain America the First Avenger, which I actually thought was okay. It's the weakest Captain America movie for sure, and I'll get to the sequels eventually. Overall, I liked the movie, I guess. The first 50 minutes or so when Captain America is not Captain America, when he's the weak Steve Rogers, he's actually very interesting. The effect on the actor are really convincing, and the character of Steve Rogers is insanely likable. Even later he's likable. The interactions he has with Peggy, even though I probably would have forgotten her if she wasn't brought up again. Same goes for Bucky and the other Howling Commandos. If it wasn't for Bucky and Peggy appearing in future movies, I probably wouldn't remember them that much. I do not remember the Howling Commandos aside from Bucky, and the only reason why I remember Bucky is because he plays a prominent role in future movies. But either way, the villain Red Skull, he's decent, I guess. I like Hugo Weaving as him though. Toby Jones as Arnim Zola is pretty forgettable. I like Tommy Lee Jones. I totally forgot the character's name, but I like Tommy Lee Jones in this movie. But overall, it's just kind of decent. It's just a decent movie. 5 or 6 out of 10. Right now it's a 6. Before I get to the movie I want to talk about, I'll very briefly talk about Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. I hate this movie. Here's why. Neville Dean and Taylor, which directed the Crank movies, I haven't seen the full Crank movies, but they're very entertaining from what little I've seen of them. They were wasted in this movie with just bad studio interference, a bland-ass script. This movie's horrible. It's a terrible waste of Neville Dean Taylor. In my opinion, it's worse than the other Ghost Rider movie. I know that's not the most popular opinion out there, but I will go there. I hate this movie. And honestly, I don't want to get frustrated, so I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Now let's get to The Avengers. This was a joy to watch when I first saw it, and it's one of the best written Marvel movies in my opinion. Is it one of the best? No. The first 45 minutes is kind of boring, but everything after that is amazing. And I have seen this again. And I like watching it again every now and again. All the characters have really good arcs, including Stark, including Cap, Hulk, Thor. They all have great arcs. Black Widow and Hawkeye have a decent amount of development, but they're saving Hawkeye's development for the sequel. Loki is actually a good villain this time. We've got a really good villain this time. And I like how he's just built up to Thanos, who is another amazing villain that I'll get to. But Avengers is just really fun. Captain America's suit looks terrible, I will say that. It's very silly. The lighting is so flat that it looks like a movie made for TV. Those are my biggest problems with the movie. Also, the editing and art direction overall are just not that special. Aside from the really catchy Avengers theme, I don't find the sound to be all that special either, especially the score. Otherwise, I like it. It's a good movie. Really good movie, actually. Amazing Spider-Man. I'll be honest, I rewatched this recently and I don't even remember it that much. It just exists so Sony can get the rights to Spider-Man. And overall, it's just not even worth it. Like, the effects are good, I guess. Andrew Garfield's fine. I mean, he's great in Social Network and Hacksaw Ridge. I really love him as an actor, and he has talent. But he's just kind of miscast in this movie. There's some things I do actually like in The Amazing Spider-Man, namely the perspective shots. That's something that I wish the other Spider-Man movies did. Then and now. The suit's kind of silly, the soundtrack is really bad. Not as bad as the second one, but I'll get to that garbage eventually. Next we got Iron Man 3, which I actually really like. I think it's close to the first one in quality. Because, A, it ties up Tony Stark's arc really, really well. We finally get to see the Ten Rings again. And their leader, the Mandarin, who, the twist with the Mandarin, I know why people hate it, but I loved it. I thought it was hilarious and very relieving. I mean, granted, it would have been cool if it was the real Mandarin that Ben Kingsley was playing instead of Guy Pearce, but still, the twist that Ben Kingsley's character was just an actor and that the Mandarin wasn't real, I actually thought was really funny. And it was also a relief because some of those videos with the Mandarin were utterly terrifying. I can see why they went with that. I do like how there's not a lot of Iron Man action in this movie. It's saved to the end, so you feel really satisfied when all the Iron Man suits come in. So there's like shootouts and stuff. There's a lot of more creative action that you don't typically get in movies like this. Tony Stark's arc is great. I like his interactions with the kid, but I like how the kid's not even in the movie that much. I don't think he's that bad. Pepper's done pretty well. I don't like how she's kidnapped just for a plot device. Rhodey's just there, sadly. I kind of wish Rhodey had more time to shine in this movie, but he really doesn't. One of the things I don't like about this movie is how Guy Pearce's character, Aldrich Killian, is disposed of. He survives the suit that Iron Man puts on him. He survives that blowing up, which, honestly, that should have been his comeuppance right there. But instead, no, he resurrects himself somehow, and then Pepper blows him up with a missile, which was really anticlimactic. If you want my opinion, his comeuppance should have been when the Mark 42 suit blows up on him. That should have been his comeuppance, but oh well. I liked Iron Man 3. I like it a lot. Much better than Iron Man 2. And it's certainly better than the Wolverine, which is so forgettable that I have absolutely nothing to say about. And it's also much better than Thor the Dark World. Thor the Dark World sucks! Like, this movie is so boring. I saw this in theaters, and I actually regret seeing it in theaters. I'm not even kidding. This is the only Marvel movie that I've seen in theaters that I regret watching in theaters, aside from maybe Captain Marvel, which is a better movie than this. This is the worst MCU movie by far. Loki is one of my favorite characters in this movie, and he's the only likable part of this movie for me. The production design is a massive step down from the first. Jane Foster and Kat Dennings' characters are much worse in this movie. Thor and Jane Foster have no chemistry. Thor is just your generic hero character now. I really do not like this movie at all. Next we've got 2014, which is a really solid year for Marvel movies, with one exception, and I'll say why. First, we've got Captain America the Winter Soldier, which was great. In the top 5 best MCU films. It's easily the best Captain America film, excluding one Avengers movie that I'll eventually get to. This film expands on the characters really well. The pacing is perfect. The twists are actually well done. Like, the twist that Hydra was hiding in S.H.I.E.L.D. and becoming its mirror was incredibly well done, and it shocked me when I first saw it. The twist that Bucky was still alive, I mean, if you didn't read the cast list, you wouldn't see it coming. I unfortunately did, so I did see it coming, but still it's a decent twist that Bucky was the Winter Soldier. That reminds me, the Winter Soldier and Robert Redford's character, they're both fantastic villains. They're some of the better Phase 2 villains, actually. In my opinion, the best Phase 2 villains. Winter Soldier is a legitimate threat, and Alexander Pierce, although he's wrong, he's understandable. His motivations make sense. And Robert Redford does a decent job as Alexander Pierce. But the fight scenes are amazing. I mean, obviously they're choreographed, but they're really, really, really well choreographed. My one problem with the film is the cinematography, especially the color palette and the lighting. It's pretty bland, actually. In fact, all 4 of the Marvel Russo movies have extremely bland cinematography, if you want my opinion. Especially the color palettes. Oh, except for maybe Infinity War, the color palette in the other 3 MCU Russo movies, Endgame, this movie, and Civil War, is so bad. But otherwise, I love Winter Soldier. Absolutely loved it. And then we've got X-Men Days of Future Past, which is, in my opinion, the second best X-Men movie ever. The only X-Men movie besides one other that I've watched more than 3 times. Because it's that good. It's got everything I want in a summer blockbuster and more. It is just a really, really, really good movie. It's better than most of the MCU movies, in my opinion. X-Men Days of Future Past is just a really well-written, really high-stake movie. The actors are all great. I like that we get a nice contrast between Magneto and Professor Xavier, both old and young. Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen with the old, and James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender as the young. That's really well done. Wolverine also has a great amount of screen time in this. He's a very likable character. The Quicksilver scene is amazing. I love the Quicksilver scene in this movie. It's so good. Overall, I love Days of Future Past. I think it's a great, great Marvel movie. One of the better ones, in fact. Next we got The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is a total stinker. It's the worst Spider-Man movie by far, and I don't even like Venom that much. the soundtrack is so bad. It's just really bad dubstep with this really terrible, terrible music. He lied to me. He hates me. Something, fragility, electricity. It's so bad. I feel like I'm getting lung cancer from saying that. Oh well. Not only that, but the villains are awful. Like, the Rhino's in there for less than 2 minutes. And Paul Giamatti's terrible as him. Andrew Garfield is even worse in this one. I don't even remember the actor's name, but the actor for Harry Osborn was terrible. Hamming it up, but not even in a fun way. Jamie Foxx as Electro, his performance was fine, his character wasn't. Side note for the movie, this is really nitpicky, but the fish that were in that tank that Electro fell in, those are not what electric eels look like. I'm sorry. Those are the designs of moray eels, which I have dove with in the wild, by the way. Electric eels, A, are not actually eels. Those are the designs of a moray eel. Electric eels do not look anything at all like that, and they don't have teeth. And why would you keep a vat of these giant eels? Because that's not what electric eels look like. Like, a Google search of electric eels would have saved this mistake. I'm not even kidding. And like, you can go to a local aquarium, or hell, there are zoos that have electric eels in them. Zoos! The National Zoo, for example, in DC, that has electric eels in it. Anyway, I can't stand that mistake, but it is nitpicking. Overall, this is a really bad movie, terribly written. The one thing I do like about it, and it's unfortunate, is Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy and her interactions with Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker. They are well done. Her death scene is done incredibly well, and I will commend the movie for that. Other than that, I don't like this movie at all. Now I will finally go to Guardians of the Galaxy. One of my favorite MCU films, and probably the best one I've reviewed to this date. Guardians of the Galaxy is really, really fun. Insanely fun. Great characters. Excellent cinematography and direction, thank you, James Gunn. My one problem with this film, and it is a huge problem, is the villain. He is a terrible, terrible, terrible villain. He's defeated relatively easily. His performance by Lee Pace is not good. His character is bad. Overall, really weak villain. Otherwise, this is a great film. Genuinely a great film. Is it artistic? I wouldn't call it that. I mean, none of the films I've reviewed have any form of art in them. Because overall, I know that Marvel movies are made for money. I know that. So I'm not going to treat these films like they're pieces of art or whatever, because they're not. They're pieces of entertainment, and they're really, for the most part, good pieces of entertainment. So I will not dock away points for them not being made for art. I won't compare them to films that are made for art. There are only maybe a handful of superhero films that are made for art, namely Into the Spider-Verse, possibly Logan, and the Dark Knight trilogy. And ironically, those are the best of all of the superhero movies out there. What a coincidence, oh gee. But still, back to the Guardians of the Galaxy. All the characters are amazingly likable. I like how Vin Diesel as Groot has one line, I am Groot. And he's just so amazing. I am Groot. Okay, I'm not gonna do that anymore. Bradley Cooper's Rocket is amazing. His character gets even better as it goes along too. Dave Bautista as Drax is really likable. Really funny character. I like how the fact that his misunderstanding of literacy is not a one thing with him. I like how he also has a tragic backstory. Zoe Saldana as Gamora is a great character, and her character, like Rocket, gets even better as the series goes along. Chris Pratt as Peter Quill, aka Star-Lord, is a great lead. And overall, I love this movie. Amazing action, great visuals, fantastic soundtrack. This puts Suicide Squad to shame. Fantastic editing, a lot of things actually. And it's so fun. And I like how it doesn't take itself very seriously. Now, if it did, I would not have liked this film nearly as much. Still, I highly recommend it. Eventually, I will do a part 3 video where I review every film in this criteria from 2015 to 2019. That's all I have to say. See you next time.